Hello, it's Brother Juro, YouTube philosopher, and we continue with sacrifice as a concept. In our last episode, we were paralleling this issue of sacrifice with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and that story. And we taking marriage and using it as kind of a metaphor for the metaphor that was given in this biblical story. Now, the situation continues where, as we had saw in the earlier episode where we were talking to the rich man and he's coming to Jesus and asking, what must he do to gain eternal life? Well, if you look back at the Garden of Eden story, there was a tree that would give Adam and Eve eternal life if they had eaten of it. So we see that our ancestors, or Adam and Eve's progeny, those that came after, I'm saying ancestor, and it's the other way around. Adam was the beginning, so his progeny, those that came forth after Adam left. Okay, so his progeny, they're recognizing these things that were lost. And we're having conversations, no one wants to die. What death, became a part of the reality of humankind as a result of Adam and Eve disobeying. And we're trying to figure out a way to get eternal life. In fact, much of the scientific enterprise is involved in creating longevity. We're trying to live longer. We're trying to not die. And this is one of the promises that the scientist is trying to present to someone who believes in science as being a method to recover, to make well, to give benefit. And as I told you guys in some previous videos, that death is presented as a consequence of our disobedience and our lack of trust in God's word. And every day we see so many of us dying, but none of us are really looking to see or to move in a direction where we really start to trust in God and his word. We're trusting that by our own physical effort that we can subvert or we can get around God and his plan that he implemented to reconcile us. And so we sacrifice years of going to school and studying, thinking that, finding a cure for cancer is going to be such a wonderful thing. And, you're working by the sweat of your brow was to yield, to get the sustenance to continue in your life, to do the very thing God has told you to do. Honor his word and do what he told you to do. So we sacrifice so many things, and we have to do it because that's the new paradigm that this world operates under, sacrifice. And so we see God giving the ultimate sacrifice that enables us to get the very thing that we lack, the very thing we question, the very thing that we look to resolve, the very thing that has given us the most frustration and fear. Because we fear God. We are afraid of God. And we see historically when we go through all these biblical stories, most of the time when man encounters God or encounters a godlike figure like an angel, we become fearful And the greatest admonition that's repeated over and over and over again in the Bible is for men to not be afraid. Because we fear that which we shouldn't be afraid of. And the only reason why we fear God is because we lack understanding that He loves us, that He's for us, and all of these things that are before us, that are frustrating to us, that cause us grief, is our own disobedience to doing the things that He's commanded us to do from the beginning. So, comparing this thing in marriage, I basically said that a good husband is going to take responsibility to provide, to protect, and to be accountable to his wife and to his children. But we see in Proverbs, what the woman is supposed to do. You can pick it up in Proverbs 31, verse 10. It is a very clear detail of what the woman is supposed to be up to. And some people took issue when I basically said that a woman's identity is obliterated when she becomes married, because her last name is no longer associated with her father and the family that she was a part of back then. It now gets reassociated with her husband. And so she has a new identity. And this new identity is a unified whole. And so to the husband, his identity changes as well, because he's no longer an individual per se. He's an individual that is descriptive of having a wife, and this woman now being a part of his body. Because his last name didn't change, but his last name did take on another dimensional aspect, in that now he has a feminine quality. He has become a new creature in unity. And so it should be expected, just as he was born with this body. The human body is not who we are in and of ourselves, but we have been unified with it in birth. And so this body is going to function and operate according to our will, but because the body isn't really totally ours, it was given to us, it will also be subject to the whim and the power of the ultimate owner, which is God. And so God has cursed the ground for our sakes. So where did this body that we enjoy, that we use, come from? God says, for ye are made of dust, and out of the dust you have come, and so to the dust you shall return. So the ground being cursed, the body is also now cursed. It's subject to the same curse as the ground that it came out of. So there's nothing to get upset about when we see the body getting old, our vision growing dim, and ultimately death taking our bodies and placing them back into the ground where they had originally come from. And so the woman and the man, both being unified in marriage, they're technically now a new animal. So if I have a part of my body that is cancerous, it is great that, one, it can be identified as cancer, and it's even greater that surgeons have the skill and ability to remove the cancer without really having any effect on the body, maybe to leave a scar where the incision had to be made to remove it. And here we got a woman that may marry a man, and she decides that she's not happy being a part of this relationship, and she goes off to commit adultery. And the only thing that is going to happen is for her to just be confronted with her rebellion and having to say, I'm sorry, and we can just resume the relationship as if nothing happened. That's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that as the leader and authority, the man takes responsibility. So God took responsibility when he had these two creatures outright rebel against what he told them to do, and the consequence was that they couldn't have the same relationship with God as they formerly enjoyed. They can't even see God. They can't walk with him in the cool of the day. But they can have conversations with him because he didn't forsake them totally. He gave them a promise, and he said, this is what you guys are going to have to do in order to get restoration. And the restoration process is going to take more effort on my part than it will be on yours. But you have a part to play, just as you had a part to play in the beginning of being regents and being dominating on this earth. So too, I'm going to give you another part to play to where you can exercise the trust that I had given you to do here on this earth as the rulers and dominators of this world. And that's where Jesus comes in. Jesus is going to do the real heavy lifting in this sacrificial system game. And the only thing that God requires us to do is the very thing that we didn't do in the garden, the very thing that every generation of humans that have come out have failed to do. The thing is, God has made certain that certain human beings on this earth will really get it. Adam and Eve got it because as soon as they got put out of the garden, they had children, because the promise was that through the woman giving birth that this salvation could take place. This promise could be fulfilled. But it was through a virgin birth. So Adam and Eve weren't maybe not paying so much attention, because here it was when they got out of the garden, they started having sex and started having babies. And Eve got excited with the first child because this was a baby that God promised. But this wasn't the promised, virgin birth. But the whole thing is Adam and Eve are acting on God's promise. They're being fruitful, they're multiplying, and they're hoping that these children and the story they're going to tell their children, the story that God gave them to know and understand, it's going to be handed down. And what we got to understand is Adam and Eve were perfect in their generations, in that they didn't have any contamination on their genetic background other than the sin and the cursing that they received. But God made a promise to set all of these things right. And it was through their action of trust and belief that we could reach a point of fulfillment, because this was a prophetic promise that God had given them. And so now they're acting on it. And the funny thing is, they had two children, Cain and Abel. And you could see in their situation how they acted out on the promises of God. Cain didn't do precisely what God had told them to do, that Adam and Eve told them to do. Abel did. And here it is, God is still interacting with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, because when Cain made his offering to God, it was not accepted. But when Abel made his offer to God, it was accepted. And God told Cain, if you do good, it will go well with you. But in the day that you do evil, sin lies at the door, waiting to dominate you, to rule over you. And Cain chose to let the sin fester and dominate, and ultimately it resulted in the first recorded human murder. God had killed an animal and stripped it of its skin to provide a covering for Adam and Eve. But murder, the first murder that took place of a human, was done by Cain killing his brother. So we can see, and we're going to see in a later episode, we're going to continue more of this discussion, because I think you guys are starting to see just how cursed we are, but just how blessed God continues to be, because he could have easily destroyed all of these things and started over. But we're going to see in the next episode just how that would have impugned God's righteousness and his goodness. So I hope at this point you guys are thinking and seeing the consistency of this sacrificial system being a part of our lives, whether we're atheists or whether we're Christian. And hopefully, in thinking about these things more deeply, we're going to get blessed. So peace to you all.